All right. We will be talking about alibis today. My name is Abby, and I'm joined
Hi,
by
Rebecca.
And Claire.
Lovely. So we'll get into what an alibi is. So basically, it's used as a defense. It's generally given by an individual, but it's given to exclude someone from being accused of a crime. It can be also given by someone that was around the individual at the time of the crime, but it's just a defense mechanism. So the issue relating to alibis and wrongful convictions is there can be things such as jury biases, which will lead to wrongful convictions. Innocent people who are accused of a crime can't produce a credible alibi, and also sometimes courts just fail to produce alibis when they're given or they dismiss them. So there are some issues. So obviously the issues that pose for functioning and effective functioning and decision makings in the criminal justice system is we wonder how alibis should be collected, how they should be presented at trial, how will this lead to wrongful imprisonment or the guilty walking free. So we looked at some studies that talked about the science behind alibis and the issues. I looked at one from 2004 and 2011, two separate studies done by the same people, looking at how the impact of an alibi is when the alibi witness has some kind of relationship to the accused. Both studies found consistently that juries will be really they won't be very invested, or they'll be quite skeptical of an alibi produced by an alibi witness who has a relationship to the defendant, whether that's marital or just family. And we also looked at another study which was done in 2012 by Elizabeth and colleagues, which looked at the innocent being unable to produce credible alibis. And some of the reasoning behind the family provided alibis issues, it cited kinship theories and reciprocal altruism. And basically what this relates to, it has its basis in biological functioning, but psychologically speaking, kinship theory relates to someone who's related to the accused choosing to lie for the accused so the accused can go on and live a fulfilling life. So it's a self-sacrificial situation. And it's the same for reciprocal altruism, just in strangers. And then looking at the second one, so the innocent unable to provide credible alibis, Elizabeth and colleagues found that this was related to memory. They just weren't able to generate alibis at all, or they mistakenly generated alibis, or they just had no one there to produce an alibi for them. So lots of reasons why alibis might not be able to be generated. So we'll look at some cases.
Yeah, so the Scottsboro Boys was a case in the Jim Crow South. So it was a time when there was legal enforced segregation between black and white. So think To Kill a Mockingbird. But essentially, there were 9 African American teenagers on a freight train who were accused by 2 white women, Victoria Price and Ruby Bates, of rape. The men were relying on testimony from alibi witnesses. There were over 20 others on the train who came forward to say they'd seen the men. But nevertheless, they were falsely convicted by an all-white jury, even after one of the women admitted to lying to the court. That was an issue. They were convicted. It was a landmark Supreme Court decision where out of the 9 men, 5 of them were convicted. 3 of them had prison time up to 75 years, but by the 40s, 3 of them were released or had escaped. But the 5th man, Clarence Norris, was given a death sentence. He remained in prison until 1976 when he was finally pardoned. So, yeah,
So it was an
wasn't
issue.
a great case.
Yeah, sort of how prejudice trumps alibis, especially when there's lots of alibis, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll have a look at Becca's case.
Yeah, so my case was Richard Rosario. So on June 9th, 1996, George Collazo, I believe it is, was murdered. And Richard Rosario stated that he was in Florida when the crime happened in the Bronx. He said he had 13 alibi witnesses who could testify for him. Those weren't included in his trial. So he was sentenced to 25 years to life on November 23rd, 1998. He remained in prison until 2016, so he served 20 years. He was released just because he filed to 440 motions to get out of prison, just stating that he had an alibi witness and it wasn't included in the trial. In that he was awarded $5 million in 2022 for being wrongfully imprisoned. Two of his alibi witnesses that he had were included partially in the trial, and they completed a polygraph test in which they passed, and so did Rosario as well. He passed his polygraph test, none of which was included. Ultimately, the jury discounted his alibi witnesses as they were friends and family.
Which sort of relates back to that concept of kinship theory that we were talking about earlier on.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I believe all of them were family and friends. He was in Florida for a friend's childbirth. So they were giving birth to a child. And when the photo lineup happened, two claimed witnesses of the crime had identified Rosario, one of which had previously stated that he never saw the gunman, even though he then proceeded to identify Rosario, which is quite a questionable identification.
Yeah. So it's another situation where like eyewitness identification trumps alibis, and it's like he was able to produce a credible alibi with witnesses that were able to agree with him, and it didn't matter, which is really unfortunate.
And later on, when they finally thought about looking into his alibis, just because of time and stuff like that, their memory had faded and couldn't give specific dates that he was there and stuff like that. And I mean, like, there was no physical evidence that connected Rosario to the case at all either.
Same as the Scottsboro boys. They tried to look into the alibis in the 70s when this occurred in the 30s. So there wasn't very much luck with that at that point.
The people producing those alibis would be old and they'd have memory issues. So we've got about
especially also just specific dates.
Which is just not possible. We have about 2 minutes left. So we've spoken about psychological science. So we'll just jump into some solutions that we might think could help the justice system in using alibis as a useful form of evidence. So we said that forensics could be helpful sometimes. Although I think, we spoke about some issues, how it can be leaned on a little bit too much. And what else?
It's hard when there's no DNA evidence anywhere for anybody. Then alibis kind of have to be kind of believed.
And then there's the issue of who's producing the alibi, and will the jury deem it credible evidence?
And if it actually is like an untruthful alibi as well, it's very hard to figure out if they aren't lying.
Exactly. So that sort of leads us into, with 1 minute left, we'll just think about some questions that are still open. So just how can we improve the justice system to make sure that alibis are useful? So we said, how are alibis handled, which would have impacted your case, Becca, if they'd been done correctly.
I mean, they never the officers never presented that there was 13 witnesses, which just makes it difficult because they are such a crucial part of their alibi.
Why are they not trusted? So Claire, in your case, if the boys that produced the alibi were trusted, then obviously that wrongful conviction wouldn't have occurred. And then and then we also talked about why they're sometimes not asked for, which is just a systematic issue.
And, especially if they don't have any other evidence. And if they do have any DNA evidence, then it's not going to be asked for.
And also looking at funding and time that it takes to follow up alibis. Sometimes it's just not possible in the current system, as silly as that is.
Yeah, exactly. So we have come to the end of our 10 minutes. So I'll stop that there.